Hi, everybody. Okay, that was like one brief video question mark that happened. I was hoping this time around, actually, we could do a live Zoom where everybody was on the screen asking questions. I'm not quite sure if I can get that run for us. Give me one more minute, and then I really will get us started. Let me see. I was hoping again that as participants, you guys could log on. I know there's a place where you can answer questions, but I was hoping we could all join. And I know Zoom has that feature, and for some reason, I'm not sure why it's not enabled. But to that point, let me introduce myself. I'm Amy Hedemio. I'm the scientific director over at Body Science down in Miami. And we focus on a number of inflammatory conditions, and MTHFR is probably at the top of that list. And I've done a handful of videos just describing how we treat MTHFR here in the clinic, and thought today would be a less formal way of doing that, meaning I didn't put a slide deck together. Instead, I've seen a lot of you folks joining on the Facebook page and asking a lot of questions. And what I'd really like to do is start an open dialogue where we can get together from time to time and you can get these questions answered. And although we can, as a team over here at Body Science, make sure that we're answering the questions on Facebook as often as possible, I think sometimes things get lost in the translation. Sometimes it's hard for me to come up with a comprehensive explanation, and then there's so many other folks kind of coming into that as well with opinions. So what I'd like to create from this point forward is a way that we can get together from time to time, whether it's every 2 weeks or once a month, and really answer the questions that people have so that you can get the kind of treatment that you need and get to the heart of some of the problems that a lot of you guys are experiencing. So in the future, keep a lookout as well. We'll let you know when we have those webinars. It's usually for me towards the end of the day. It's at the end of a clinic day. And that way we'll have time to go through things. So my goal right now is really just to spend about 30 minutes and go through the most common questions. And so I have the list that Mackenzie put together for us. You guys probably know Mackenzie. She gets on and answers a lot of the questions. She's the head of the team that handles the online questions. So she'd already prepared a list for me. And as I was saying, I was hoping that everybody could show up here together, and that way you could just answer questions. We could all just speak at the same time. Because it's not set up like that this time, well, number one, I'll see how to get that done next time. And number two, I'll start answering the questions that Mackenzie prepared. And also, if there are questions that you have, you're welcome to go ahead and type them into the screen. So let me tell you guys the handful of questions that I have here in front of me and see if we can kind of find a sense of what's most important moving forward. The question for, do these mutations make it harder to detox heavy metals? So that's one on the side of detox. And also why I always feel like I'm sick, and do these mutations affect the immune system? So, okay, let's look at those, and as well, the link that a lot of people are asking about homocysteine. Okay, at the core, MTHFR is about detoxification, and very specifically, it is a way to look at the detoxification system as it pertains to things that require methylation. So I get that even when I said that, that sounded confusing. Let me say it differently. Bodies have different garbage cans for different toxins, and methylation is one of those garbage cans. If you have an MTHFR mutation, then you are limited to the number of garbage cans that you have. And so the amount of garbage ultimately spills over, and that becomes toxic debris in the blood. It causes the immune system to become confused and overregulate. Common symptoms of that: overactive immune and toxicity. It could be headaches, mood swings, poor focus, poor concentration, difficulty sleeping. It can be weight gain and headaches. A lot of people have like kind of a low grade, constant headache. So it's the symptom, not so much of MTHFR, but of toxins that are building up. And again, the reason is as folks that have MTHFR, we are all generally not great at detoxifying. And that's to say we have a lot of other detoxification pathways, sulfur, acetylation, glucuronidation, so that's glutathione. There are other pathways, but it still doesn't change the fact that there are a lot of toxins that require methylation as its way to remove garbage. And when garbage that requires methylation winds up in the body of somebody that has a methylation deficiency, it's going to stick around for long periods of time. And then to the question about the immune system and does MTHFR dysregulate the immune, it's not MTHFR that's dysregulating it, it's the toxic burden. And so let's take a step back and just talk about MTHFR. For anybody that already knows the science behind it, what I can tell you is my goal is just a brief overview, and that way we can touch on the question about homocysteine. So I promise not to kill you with a lot of science. Let me say this. Methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase is about two things. One, the M, which is methylation, that's the part we just talked about, and the fact that phase 2 of the liver doesn't really have a lot of methylation garbage cans, so garbage can spill over. The tetrahydra is just kind of the shape of the molecule. I could call myself Amy right-handed if I wanted, so I could say ARH for Amy right-handed. Methyl tetrahydra is, again, the tetrahydra is just the shape of it. But those last two letters in the acronym folate reductase, that's pretty important. So you're looking at the issue that folks that have MTHFR deal with when it comes to folate, and by comparison, folic acid. And so just talking about, again, things that can make you sick when you have MTHFR, folate reductase is an enzyme. Bodies make it. It's in primarily the mitochondria in the third complex to make energy. And the long and short is you eat foods that have folate. So green leafy vegetables is an example. And folate is just a B vitamin. And then that B vitamin gets plugged into the mitochondria. And in order to use it, you have to make it usable. I have a pen. I'm going to grab it. Hang on. Okay. So the long and short is, listen, I've got this pen. It writes well, but it doesn't change the fact it has that pen cap. So until I alter the pen and take the pen cap off in a way that I can actually write, even though the pen is potentially usable like this, it's not actually usable until I make it usable. Okay, so removing the cap is what allows me to use the pen. For folate, in order to make it usable, you need to reduce it with an enzyme, and that enzyme is folate reductase. And in the absence of the enzyme folate reductase, bodies have a really hard time utilizing folate. And so if you have an MTHFR mutation, not only is there a methylation deficiency, so not enough methyl garbage cans, but aside from that, and in addition to it, folate reductase, the enzyme that activates folate, is not working as often as it should. The enzyme isn't as active as often as it should. And so since folate gets reduced into 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, and that's what bodies use, and because the enzyme to create that reaction, right, pen and pen cap, is not as active as it should be if you have MTHFR, then there's a block of energy, a blockage, a stoppage of energy, in addition to a detoxification buildup. So when you think about the symptoms of MTHFR, it kind of feels like that, right? It feels like toxic and tired kind of all the time and all together. And that's really what the mutation is about. And so the question is, what do you do? Because when bodies become really dirty and they have to make inflammation, one of the ways that they can make that inflammation is through homocysteine. And elevated homocysteine levels are not something that occurs in all versions of MTHFR, but in the C variant as a double copy, so a homozygous C677T, those folks are pretty susceptible to increased homocysteine. And for everybody else, even though homocysteine may not elevate, generalized inflammation does. And so a good way of handling MTHFR, really there's two things. One, avoid as many toxins as you can. And that was the question about metals. So stay away from heavy metals, because if you have MTHFR, you're not great at eliminating them. And then thing number two, which becomes important, stay away from folic acid. So let's talk folic acid. It is a synthetic substitute for folate. So folate is the natural occurring B vitamin that's in green leafy stuff. And folic acid is a synthetic version of it that's added commonly into foods, all kinds of foods, cereals and breads. It's fortified into rice and added into just, again, a large majority of processed foods. And so because folks with MTHFR are not good at processing folic acid, the synthetic stuff, right? So you already don't have a lot of folate reductase enzyme, and folate reductase doesn't work well on folic acid. So folic acid continues to build up. And what people with MTHFR can develop is essentially a folic acid toxicity. And so if you're eating processed foods that have folic acid in it, to eat something and then afterwards just feel kind of low and slow, just generally like all the energy has been sucked out of you, right? Commonly, that is something that had folic acid in it, and the folic acid levels have elevated, and there isn't enough folate to balance it. So the amount of unmetabolized folic acid is much higher than the amount of folate, the natural vitamin, and that for bodies feels very uncomfortable, and especially for people that have MTHFR, and so symptoms will start. So now just kind of going back to some of the questions that I saw on my list that you guys were asking about, detoxification. So the number one priority, remove toxins from your environment as much as you can. Know that for a lot of people that are on tonight that have MTHFR, what you're battling with is not the symptoms of new toxins, but existing toxins that can't get out of the body because they can't methylate out. For me, I normally use here in my office a methylation detox. My goal on this call is not to get deep into supplements. I think we'll do that call in the future. So let me not go through every last thing that I use, but instead just kind of give, again, a broad overview of MTHFR. If you do want a recommendation as far as a detox, so how to methylate and get this stuff out, just send an email or a text and let me know, or put it up on the Facebook page, and I'll be sure to get back to you on it. And then just kind of going back to my list of questions that everybody sent in. Do I need to take a methylation vitamin? Okay, so remember, if you are somebody with an MTHFR mutation, then you are somebody with a methylation deficiency, right? The mutation that you have, the actual mutation, determines the extent of the methylation deficiency, right? So if you've got a double C, 677T, if you've got two of those copies, you have the greatest limitation by comparison to a single A copy, right? Where you still are able to make the enzyme, just not quite as much as somebody that doesn't have that mutation. And so as far as supplementation, I'm a proponent, right? If you can't methylate, then the goal would be to add methylation to compensate for that mutation. The problem that I see a lot of times when people come on in, they're adding way too much methylation, or they're adding it in the wrong way, or they're adding lots of B12 without folate, or lots of folate without B12. And they're getting this further dysregulated, over methylated kind of mess. And it can feel super over energized, like over caffeinated. But then when you actually go and try and use energy, it's like you don't really have any. So it feels kind of like a combination of too much and too little energy at the same time. And if you have MTHFR and you've over methylated, you're probably looking at the screen like shaking your head. Yes, oh my gosh, I've totally felt like that before. Tired, but you can't fall asleep. Wired, even though you're really tired. And so the real key is, I like methylation support for somebody that has a methylation deficiency. You want to just be careful with how much of it you use. I like when it's matched to the gene, right? That's always going to be your best, because the genetic component is going to dictate, your genotype is going to dictate the degree of methylation support that you need. And so again, if you can match the amount of methylation that you're taking to that gene type, you're going to get the very best results. I mean, take a look on the bottom. I didn't know if anybody would have any questions. I don't see anything yet, but again, guys, if you do have any questions, my goal in being here tonight is not a really structured format, but instead to answer any questions that you have. So I'll check out my list to see what else I have on my side. And again, if you want to ask anything, you're welcome to. Let me just take a look. Okay, there is so much information about these mutations. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Where do I start? I think we have a good sense of things at this point. Thing number one is make sure you eliminate any exposures for folic acid. Thing number two is make sure that you get plenty of folate in your natural diet. Thing number three is get clean, right? Make sure that you're not coming in contact with parabens and phthalates in your makeup or your shampoos or your shaving creams. Make sure that you're not wearing lots of perfume because of the binders that are used over there. Try and get to the cleanest environment that you can, all right? Okay, I just saw a question come in. It is, what about taking hormones like birth control? Okay, so I would like to tell you that there is a good alternative to a birth control pill because that would be my preference of a way to handle things. It's something that we struggle with here in our office, which is the fact that synthetic hormones can become dysregulators in individuals that have MTHFR. So to say this differently, progesterone, so natural progesterone, is hydroxylated out of a body, meaning it does not require methylation. Estrogen, however, whether you take it as a birth control pill or whether you make it, which all cycling women make estrogen, so whether you take estrogen or you make estrogen, the pathway for estrogen to be metabolized and removed requires methylation, meaning women that have an MTHFR mutation can build up too much estrogen, right? They can't get the estrogen back out. So ovaries and fat stores, and to a much lesser extent, the adrenal glands can make estrogen, and then it relies on methylation that's limited, and any estrogen that can't be methylated stores in the body, and unmethylated estrogen can lead to problems, any number of problems, including cancer. So the long and short is adding extra estrogen in is always a tough thing to do if you've got MTHFR, and if regular or natural bioidentical estrogen is already tough, synthetic estrogen for a body, so the stuff that's found in birth control pills, is even more difficult. So for lots of women that we treat over here that are on birth control, it exacerbates the symptoms of estrogen dominance in women that are MTHFR positive. So now let's talk about what that looks like. Estrogen dominance is when you have too much estrogen, especially when we're talking about it in relative ratio to the amount of progesterone. So the symptoms of estrogen dominant are really twofold. It's the symptoms of a lot of estrogen along with the symptoms of not enough progesterone. Because even if you're making progesterone, oftentimes it's not enough to balance the amount of estrogen, either because estrogen is being increased because it's coming from birth control, or estrogen is just not getting removed because of MTHFR. And so symptom-wise, the low progesterone portion of this thing oftentimes looks like increasing anxiety, ruminating thoughts, right? So getting an idea that just keeps going round and round in your mind. Elevated progesterone can oftentimes feel overwhelming. People will describe it like there's kind of a dark cloud kind of hanging over you, feeling overwhelmed. And it can feel like low motivation, like you want to do stuff and you plan to do stuff. And there's so many things that you have on your list. And when it actually comes to doing it, you're like, I just don't want to do it. And again, that sense of feeling overwhelmed, anxious, and ruminating thoughts. Okay, so if that's a common kind of personality of low progesterone, elevated estrogen can be weepiness. So just, feeling like you want to cry or just kind of feeling teary-eyed. Estrogen makes all of us feel kind of more sentimental. So it's the idea that somebody will say something and you almost like take it to heart, even though you don't want to. The comment maybe wasn't even that bad, but it just feels like, Okay, so too much estrogen commonly makes that kind of oversensitized sense of things. Estrogen makes weight gain. It loves to make fat stores grow, and fat stores make estrogen. So it's like this self-feeding loop. Estrogen commonly makes headaches, and so women that are getting headaches either from too much estrogen in their cycle or adding birth control pills and getting estrogen, commonly they'll get headaches or migraines, especially around their period or 10 to 14 days later around ovulation. Let me think of other estrogen things that really come to mind. And those are really the top ones, huh? The weight gain, especially with things like fatty cellulite, headaches that worsen, especially around a period, irritability and snappish moodiness. We all, if any woman that's on this call knows estrogen, because estrogen and PMS are essentially the same thing. So women develop PMS because of the estrogen spike that happens in order to get menstruation, right? So PMS and estrogen dominance are one and the same. So if you're getting symptoms and it feels like you're chronically stuck in PMS, then likely you are estrogen dominant. And if you have a dysregulating cycle, meaning you're cycling, but it's not every 28 days or 26, 27, 28, 29 days, but instead, it's like every 20 days or every 40 days or something that's kind of a week earlier, a week late, then something is disrupted between estrogen and progesterone. And if the cycle when you bleed is clotty, crampy, again, it just reinforces the estrogen progesterone. And if you are that kind of person and you're on birth control, with MTHFR, you may find that you have a number of other low progesterone related symptoms as all this estrogen keeps storing. Again, as a reminder, estrogen requires methylation. Okay. All right. Let me see what my questions are. And if anybody else on the call has any questions, feel free to ask them. I think I probably have just a couple more over here, and I'm trying to be mindful of time. So I'll keep us on until just about 6:30 and try and do these calls every couple of weeks or at least once a month to be able to answer questions. First step in improving gut health and getting rid of bloating. Okay, so here's the thing. I get the question a lot, and a lot of folks that come on over here to my office have gut issues, gut irregularity, gut dysbiosis. Lots of women have, with MTHFR, have just very, very involved constipation. I'd like to tell you that there's a single answer for this. There isn't. Instead, what I would tell you is a couple of things. Number one, a lot of people that have an MTHFR mutation, as they become toxic, they develop a degree of thyroid dysregulation. Thyroid dysregulation and bowel issues go hand in hand, right? So a sluggish thyroid is commonly going to lead to constipation. So just know it may not just be MTHFR. There may be another hormone group that's involved. And if it's bloating and a lot of constipation, definitely look at thyroid. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, if you have MTHFR, you're bad at getting toxins out. And so as those toxins are going to filter through, if they're going through the liver, they're going to get dumped into the intestines. And once they get thrown into the intestines, then they have a way, of course, of creating all kinds of inflammation in the intestines. And that can lead to bowel movements that are unpredictable. It can lead to irritable bowel syndrome. It can lead to bloating. Sometimes it's as easy as a digestive enzyme combination just to help the stool move forward. Sometimes it really is an imbalance in minerals that can be MTHFR related and require something like magnesium. Again, sometimes it could be thyroid. So I'd like to tell you that there's a one size fits all when it comes to belly issues. I know a large number of the folks, at least that I see with MTHFR, do have belly issues. Again, toxins going through the intestines in order to be eliminated and creating substantial inflammation in the intestines during that time. And so the goal would be reduce the amount of inflammatory foods that you eat for sure. So the handful of things that are always at the top of the list. So key foods that make inflammation: dairy, gluten, shellfish, peanuts, alcohol, and caffeine, right? So if you're eating those things, it doesn't mean you have to stop eating them, but it does mean expect gut-related issues because chances are you're going to have them. If you do want to get a gut that works better, remove those things for sure. I'm guessing I've got a handful of you folks on the other side kind of shaking their head and saying, but I've already removed those foods and I still have gut issues. Just know you may want to check thyroid. And to that point, let me just make the note, for lots of people with MTHFR, for lots of people in general, they have thyroid regulation that on a lab looks reasonable, but they still have all the symptoms of hypo, so slow or fast thyroid. When it comes to thyroid function, I would tell you, even when labs look good, you could still have something called subclinical hypothyroidism. So it's labs look good, but somebody has a thyroid that's slow in spite of good looking labs. Labs are useful when it comes to thyroid assessment, but it is not the only indicator. And it is not uncommon to have subclinical hypothyroidism, or again, thyroid dysregulation that's not showing up on a lab. So thyroid looks a little bit different. Commonly it will have water retention. Lots of people get it here under their eyes, and they'll get it on the edges of their tongue. Sometimes when people wake up in the morning with water retention, they'll feel it in their hands, their feet, their wrists, or their ankles. Sense of being really, really cold or having lots of hot flashes can be thyroid. Going to the grocery store and feeling like super cold, it's cold intolerance when you get to like the freezer section is a common symptom. And just general lethargy, right? Feeling tired all the time, easy to gain weight and feeling lousy. So those symptoms are thyroid commonly, and you can see why there's so much overlap with MTHFR. There are a lot of the same kinds of symptoms. No surprise, thyroids dysregulate when people are toxic. It's common. It's called sick thyroid syndrome. So for lots of people with MTHFR, they have glitchy thyroids, right? So thyroid function that's not always as good or as predictable as it should be. So again, just going back to the belly related issues, belly is super important because if you're not eliminating trash and you already have a detoxification error, you can already tell you're going to get just feeling sicker than you would otherwise. And if you talk to most folks that have MTHFR, they'll tell you what they feel, aside from the list of symptoms, what they really feel is just toxic. They generally feel toxic, slow, sluggish, tired, achy. They just feel generally toxic. And so if elimination is an area where things are not normal, so you're not having a bowel movement, one bowel movement per day, make sure that that does get regulated. Again, if I have anybody on the other side shaking their head and saying, but I'm really trying, find somebody that can help you out. You guys are always welcome to call and schedule an appointment over here. And again, I'll try and get better at putting more information out there and putting more specific information. So if today's goal was just a general overview, moving forward, what we can do is dig into the different areas. And so if it feels like it may be of use, we could certainly do a call that's focusing on thyroid as it relates to MTHFR, or focusing on fertility or fertility control as it relates to MTHFR, so birth control or hormones, or some of the other questions that had come up, whether it's the genotype and supplements or homocysteine. So you're welcome to go on to the Facebook page. I know that's how we've been communicating. So you're welcome to go over there and just leave comments. Whether or not this call felt useful or not is helpful for me to understand what you need in the future, to leave something as far as what you want to hear about next, I think that's it, huh? Those are actually the two things. Did this work for you as far as a format, and also what you want to hear about next? And then what I'll do is let me see if I can't figure out a better Zoom approach so we can all be on here together. I don't mind getting on here and talking, but I'd rather hear your questions and be able to answer them real time. That's really my goal in order to try and help with the Facebook post and really, again, get to the core of what you're asking, give you a solution so you can start getting working on it immediately, okay? So I hope this call was useful, and I will look forward to the next one. For everybody that's on, thank you so much. Again, it was a pleasure to meet you. I'm Amy, the scientific director over at Body Science. Anything that you guys need, just let me know. Okay, I have one more. Oh, it's a thank you. Hey, Christine, you're welcome. Hey, listen, again, it's a pleasure. Our goal as far as MTHFR experts, really and truly, what we're trying to do, I have a large MTHFR clinic. Listen, as much as all of you guys don't like being in a situation where you can't get the answers that you need and you can't feel better, I hate it for you as well. And as a team, we all got together at Body Science and realized we're treating folks with MTHFR. We've got a responsibility to try and help out as much as we can by putting as much information out there, educated information, so that you guys have it, so that you can have the questions that you're dealing with, your real life, situations. Oh, you're welcome. I said another thank you. You guys are welcome. That you can have the answers that you need to feel better. What I would tell you from a clinic standpoint, MTHFR is super treatable, and the symptoms are super reversible. And so on our side, we'll try and get better at making sure that you have the information that you need in order to feel much better with MTHFR. So that's my promise. And again, I know Mackenzie's on the Facebook page working really hard to make sure she gets answers out there every day. So I will look forward to our next time. I'll see you next time. We'll get more drilled down into questions. All right. Bye, guys.